Thanks for being here. My name is Jack Francis. So this workshop, I know on the schedule, is titled just prompt engineering. It's gonna be a little bit more than that today. It's gonna be focused on a little bit around just kind of LLMs in general. We'll dive into some prompt engineering, and then it's gonna be a little bit more on some AI tools and things kind of that are kind of alongside of ChatGPT that you may be able to use as well. So just want to kind of give you a heads up on that. Have a lot of great workshops coming up both tomorrow. Two workshops heavily focused on AI agents, more from like a coding and more technical perspective. If you're interested in that, definitely check those out. And then on Thursday, there's kind of a wide range of workshops. We have AI agents in cyber. There's one on RAG, one on just kind of general business content creation, video, image, audio generation. So this one, along with kind of grants this morning, is really kind of setting the foundation to help kind of give that a little bit more technical kind of background for the ones coming up as well. So if you're someone who uses ChatGPT, but you don't really use much outside of that, this one will be a perfect level for you. For someone who uses a bunch of AI tools, you're probably going to hear a lot of things you've already heard, but hopefully still will be helpful for you. So just wanted to kind of give you a heads up on just kind of what to expect for the workshop today. You're welcome to ask any questions as we go along through. I do have kind of a timer running just so I know kind of from a time perspective where we're at. So I may have to pause for some of those, wait to the end just to make sure we get through all the content, but we'll be happy to answer any questions as we go. So to start with, I want to give you a little bit about me, just kind of a quick background. So my background academically, I got my PhD in industrial engineering from Mississippi State. During my dissertation research, I really focused on machine learning for additive manufacturing, so metal 3D printing. I really focused on computer vision at the time, had cameras looking into the build, trying to predict the quality of the parts that we're creating. Since then, I've been primarily working in the DoD. Been in there for a little over 5 years, done kind of a wide range of things from natural language processing. We were using large language models before ChatGPT, like BERT, which for those who used it know that that was a fun experience, not nearly as good as they are today. I've done kind of a wide variety of things now. I'm now currently the AI Solutions Director at Davidson Technologies. I do a lot from kind of an AI strategy, proposals, rapid prototyping is kind of a little bit more about me. Top 3 core values: authenticity, learning, and fun. That's what describes me the most. So to kind of touch on the fun, I have 4 dogs. They're awesome. They run the house, but they're a ton of fun. You can see them in the bottom. I love traveling. I did a solo trip to Rome in November of last year. I got to see the Colosseum, a bunch of cool stuff there. It was a lot of fun. And then I'm deeply competitive. I love winning at everything that I do. It doesn't matter what it is. I will try and win. So just to give you kind of a little bit about me, one question I get asked pretty often in talks like this is, why AI? I've been in the field for about 8 years now, kind of prior to ChatGPT. What was it about it that really drew me to that? And for me, it's at the end of the day that we're doing all these things. We understand the math. We know like why the math should work out. We know why they should be able to do kind of the ability or have the abilities they have. At the end of the day, just like teaching machines still feels like magic. And I think that's just a really cool experience when you provide a bunch of data into a system, whether that's a computer vision doing some object detection, or it's these large language models. It still feels like magic to me, and that's kind of my reason of like why I'm in AI and why. So just wanted to give you a little bit about me before we started. So what we're going to cover today, I really want to answer 5 big questions today. So the first is on kind of current LLMs. So how do I know which LLM I should be using? Lots of them out there. What's the best one for me? When should I consider using different large language models? Context importance. Why do large language models forget what I tell them? Brian touched on this a little bit today. We'll go a little bit deeper for that. Prompt engineering. How do I make the LLM do what I want? Right? A lot of us are using ChatGPT. But how do we make sure that we're getting kind of the best output that we can get from that tool? AI tools, what exists beyond ChatGPT? Microsoft estimated in a recent paper that about 80 to 85% of people who leverage generative AI today are only using ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, or some kind of variant. There's lots of other AI tools that are out there. We're going to walk through 3 today. Some of the other workshops coming up over the next couple of days are going to cover some other ones as well. But I'll kind of give you a buffet of here are some various tools that you can go look and see what are most applicable kind of for your workflows going forward. And then agentic AI. So what comes after ChatGPT? Brian did a great job this morning talking about agentic AI. I'll go into that a little bit, but this is more kind of setting up for some of these other workshops. So we'll start with large language models, start at the very beginning. So large language model, that is the kind of technical term for what ChatGPT or Gemini is. The way that large language models work, they work by predicting the next word based on their learned patterns in the context that they've been provided. So I have an example in the bottom left. I provided to a large language model the text "deep learning is very." It would then essentially that's the context, that's the data that's being provided to it, and it's going to try and predict what is the next best word or the best next word to use. You'll see the term token used throughout here, and we'll dive into that a little bit later. But for now, just think of token as a word. Here, so there are essentially, for this specific large language model, there are 5 options that it thinks the next best word could be. So either powerful, innovative, complex, weak, or limited. It has a different probability tied to that, meaning that 43% of the time, if I gave it the prompt, it would pick powerful. 37% of the time, it would pick innovative, and so on and so forth. This is why if you've ever used ChatGPT and you put in the same prompt twice, you will get different answers each time, or not necessarily wildly different, but a little bit different in structure. And you'll see that as we go through kind of examples today. This is a feature of large language models. This is what gives them that creativity. We could make it where it only picks the best option every time, but that ends up giving this very like dry large language model output that doesn't really help and doesn't give you kind of that creative spark that a lot of us really value. So this is also why you've likely heard about hallucinations. Sometimes that next word is plausible, but it's wrong. When that happens, that's what we call a hallucination. Basically, the model is understanding here are potential next words that could happen, and it's a plausible answer, but it ends up being wrong. So, for example, if the prompt was 2 plus 2 equals blank, the probability for the answer being 4 is going to be very, very high, but the probability for some other numbers could be very, very low. It could pick those sometimes. If it picked that right, 2 plus 2 equals 5, obviously that's wrong, and that's what we would call a hallucination. One way to think about it, though, is really large language models, every time that they're generating text, they're always just generating that next token based on the probability distribution. They don't really know in kind of a true sense of what that actually means. So kind of in a sense, they're all hallucinations, but a lot of times these hallucinations are being right. So current large language models we have, obviously ChatGPT is the most popular, one that most people use. Latest estimates are about 70% of search traffic, or 70% of LM usage goes through ChatGPT. But one thing I do want you to know is ChatGPT is a collection of large language models. It is not a single large language model. So when you go on to ChatGPT and you select your model, they actually have varying different models. You can see those at the bottom. They have GPT 5.2, but they have variations of that. 5.2 Instant, Thinking, and Pro. We've also had older models. You may have heard of GPT 4.0, GPT 0.1, 0.3. All of these are different large language models. They're all kind of bundled under the ChatGPT service that allows you to interact with them. Why this is important is because those different models have different capabilities and different times that you should use them. So the instant models, these are very fast and they're pretty powerful for everyday work. The Thinking and Pro models generally solve harder work tasks more effectively. And if you're on just kind of the free tier from a ChatGPT or a Gemini perspective, you've probably only interacted with instant models. You may have had a few messages with a thinking model. Generally, those are pretty rate limited. But usually you have to be at that like $20 a month tier, which has kind of been the baseline between these tools to get access to those Thinking and Pro models. So I want to show you an example of kind of the difference between them. So I am actually, as you saw, I'm a traveler. I am actively planning a trip to Germany in March. So I'm going to ask kind of an instant model, and then we're going to ask a pro model to kind of see the difference between the output and kind of what you would expect. So just kind of as a heads up for the kind of, I'm going to show this for the rest of the workshop. On the left side of the screen, these will be the prompts that I've already run. I've got them loaded just so we can see kind of the output here. And then on the right, this will be kind of the updated version. We'll be running them live. So the one on the left here, this is the actual one from the fast version. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the fast mode here and then let that run. Gemini, what it will generally do is, because it's tied in from a Google perspective, it'll try and look from a personalized intelligence. It didn't do it this time. You can see that it instantly started generating, right? Very, very fast. It gives me this 5-day historical itinerary. So I've got day one. I've got various sites that it wants me to see. Going through and do that, and I can go through and scroll. And generally, this is very good output. There's nothing wrong about this, but it is kind of that instant model, meaning it's prioritizing speed over being kind of expansive and as expressive as possible. So let's say that I create a new chat, and instead I'm going to do the exact same prompt, but I'm going to use the Pro model instead. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to listen to full screen for a second. It's going to pull up a tool alongside it. The first thing that you'll notice is that alongside of kind of the message here, what the LM is doing, or what Gemini is doing under the hood, is it's actually doing what we call thinking or reasoning. So it's going through, it has my initial prompt that it's using, but now it's adding more things that it, like, I think I should know about this, and it's trying to kind of reason its way to a much better answer. So for example, it's starting with assessing Berlin's history. Looking at, I'm trying to formulate a historical itinerary. It's going to analyze my user profile. So We'll see how much it pulls for my actual trip for this, because I have used Gemini a lot for this. But so it's looking at my user information. Sorry, my app is a little bit buggy at times. We'll let this finish really quick. Scroll through some of this. But what you'll see is on the side, on this thing, it's going to start using the Google search tool. It's going to use the Maps tool. It's going to develop some search parameters. What are things that I would want that it would want to check? Kind of again, kind of going to that more kind of agentic side of it's not just immediately answering with kind of all the data it has. It's looking out to the internet, doing searches, calling the Maps tools to do that. It's going to do some compliance checks. There's a lot of kind of safety built into Gemini. So it's considering history, analyzing some sites, mapping out key places, listing landmarks, expanding the site collection, and doing all of that. And so let me hide the linking tokens. And so what I actually see as output is given here. So on day one, it talks about the Reichstag building, Brandenburg Gate, and memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe. I can actually scroll in here onto Google Maps and see this is kind of day one. Notice they're all close together. It's prioritizing things that are walking each other because it knows if it's planning an itinerary, then I would want to put things that are close together on the same day. So it goes through and you can see, gives me more information about each of the places. Now I'm going to pull this over so we can kind of just compare the outputs between the two. So the first day for the instant model, it did say Brandenburg Gate and the Reichstag building. We saw on the map, right, this memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe was actually very close, but it ended up moving that to day two. This instant model, because it doesn't have access to these live tools, it doesn't have the Google Maps tool, it doesn't have the search tool, it's not going to be as powerful. Now, that doesn't mean it's not useful. A lot of times you don't need that. You're just wanting to summarize an email or condense some text or reformat something. A lot of times the instant model will be perfectly fine. But if you're doing something that's a bit more complex, generally the pro models are going to give you a bit more power to be able to do that. And all of this I'm showing in Gemini. Generally, all of this applies to ChatGPT and to Anthropic as well. Gemini is just kind of my preferred LLM. So that kind of leads me to kind of the best LLM for you. So what I would recommend is from an instant versus like thinking in pro perspective. Well, sorry, let me back up. For work tasks, if you're trying to say, well, should I use OpenAI, should I use Gemini, should I use Claude? At this point, there's not a big enough difference between the three that I would say you should definitely use one. Pick one that you like. I liken it. My analogy for this is we all have our favorite local Mexican restaurant in town, like a fast casual. They're all basically the exact same, but one has like a little bit better salsa, or one has a little bit better service, or one has a little bit better steak, right? And you like that a little bit more, and so that's the one that you navigate or naturally gravitate to using. These models are effectively the same way at this point. However, what I would recommend, if you've never tried out the Thinking in Pro versions, if you've always been on the free tier, I'd recommend trying those out in your favorite tool for a month. See how it goes. Generally, they have free trials that come about. You can get a month free. And if you're able to test that out and see, you will see a difference. It's hard to show in a workshop like this because a lot of it comes down to kind of the nuance, and I don't want to sit here reading 5-page responses from AI for the next hour. However, I do think it's worthwhile to test that out. It's something that will definitely kind of improve the responses you're getting. The one kind of big exception, kind of as a caveat to this, if you're doing coding tasks, there are two models currently that are way better than everything else. That's GPT 5.2 Codex, which is OpenAI's model specifically for coding, and then Claude Opus 4.5. So the Claude model is overall incredibly, incredibly good from a coding perspective. And so those are the ones I'd recommend if you're doing specifically coding. Outside of that, all the three are generally going to be about the same. Then you're going to have to start worrying about kind of your integrations, right? If you're a Google Workspace organization, Gemini is probably going to be better for you because it's going to integrate with all the things you have. And that's where kind of you'll have to make some of the preferences. So that's kind of the general LLMs. Now looking into context windows. So this one is a kind of very important point of kind of thinking about working with large language models. So every large language model has a set amount of information it can process at one time. Kind of imagine this. Imagine that we have a whiteboard and there's only so much information you can put on the whiteboard. You can write really, really small, but eventually you're going to run out of space on the whiteboard. Think of the large language model memory like when you're using a ChatGPT or when you're using Gemini. Think of it as a whiteboard. Right? You can fill it up, and they have very big whiteboards, but eventually you will get to a point where you've run out of space and you can no longer put any, or you run out of space, and so it will start erasing some of the first things that were put on it to put the newer things onto it. That's effectively how the context window works. As Brian mentioned this morning, There are some ways around this. One of the most common ones is retrieval augmented generation. The workshop about that on Thursday. But I'm not going to cover that. Um, One thing I do want to kind of highlight is this idea of tokens. So if you've been around ChatGPT, around Gemini, you've probably heard that term before. Tokens are like words, but sometimes words are broken into multiple tokens. There's a technical reason for why this happens, and if you have questions later on, we can go into that in more detail. But to kind of give you a high level, just general idea of kind of how to think about it, roughly 1,000 tokens is about 750 words, which is about a page and a half. So when you hear something, most of these models have 128,000 token or greater context window. That means you're looking at roughly 200 pages of single space text that you have. That's just kind of a rough idea. Depending on the model and kind of how they kind of architect it behind the scenes, it can be a little bit higher or lower. But the way that it works effectively under the hood is when you put in text into a model, it gets converted into numbers, which are just the token embeddings. So here's an example. We have Apple, comma, space, ChatGPT, comma, space, Gemini, comma, space, Claude. But you'll notice here, when I'm converting this into token space, all of the commas get converted to the token 11 because that is the token for them. The period is 13, and ChatGPT ends up getting split into two tokens. So the chat is token 17554, and GPT is token 162016. The numbers don't really matter, the ordering of kind of how frequently they appear. But that's how a large language model actually interacts with your text. So you probably heard, over the past couple of years, there's a running thing about how many R's are in the word strawberry. Models being very bad about answering. Well, imagine that instead of being asked how many R's are in the word strawberry, you're getting asked how many R's are in the word 1,602, right? If that's the token number for strawberry, right? And that's why they were not good at being able to figure out how many R's are in strawberry, because they don't interact with it in the kind of text way that we do. They interact with it through these numbers. There's a lot of great technical reasons for that. Happy to talk about that after the workshop, go into more detail there. But for now, that's kind of where I want to leave it from kind of. So what ends up happening is if you exceed that context window, you have really long chats, the LM will start forgetting information, right? And so what they will do, and Brian touched on this earlier, for very long chats, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude, often they will go through and actually summarize your previous messages so that it still has most of the context, but it's going to miss out on some of the specific ones. So one thing that's very important that I think a lot of people don't realize, so when I have a thread in ChatGPT and I send a message, ChatGPT responds. I send a message, ChatGPT responds, and I send another message. When I'm sending that third message, everything above is also getting sent to ChatGPT. So it's not just that single message that's getting sent, it's the entire thread that is getting sent. I want to show you one example of kind of what that looks like. So if I tell, I'm going to use Gemini for this, but if I just say the secret password is bananas, okay, we're just going to prompt it with that, let it kind of understand that is the password. It will take it not too long, but with pro mode, but while it's waiting, does anyone have a just general question they want to ask? Yeah. Um, so the not really. The best way would be is to to essentially get like summaries of those other conversations and then use those as like context to start new ones. The other potential thing, so with Gemini and with ChatGPT, it does have the option for memory, and that's outside of kind of just the specific chat. It has like the things that it will remember about you, and so if you have those features enabled, you can transfer that over, and that's one way to kind of yes, they can. Okay, so I'm gonna say, tell me about the status of the iPhone. Is it actually all right? So we'll do that. So again, right now I've just added something random to the chat, just to give it another kind of text, just so you can see. But then I'm gonna ask right after this, what is the secret? Now, if you think about this, right? If when I message with Gemini, if I was just sending this individual message, there's no way it would know the secret password. right? Because it doesn't have that context. However, what actually happens is when I'm sending what is the secret password, what actually is getting sent to Gemini is this message, the response, this message that I sent, and all of the response as well. And so what it's going to be able to do is it's going to be able to correctly tell me that the secret password. Uh, so that's one thing to kind of be aware of is that when you're interacting with these models, you're kind of going through with them, um, it's taking everything you said in that entire chat thread, and that's all going in to then make your next. And so that leads to the idea of context clutter. So if you have a single thread where you've talked about lots of different stuff, you've asked for recipes for the potluck, you've asked for email summarization, you've asked for travel tips, you've asked for all these different things, you then ask for something else after that. I mean, it's similar to like if someone came up to you and asked you a question, but then went on 3 different tangents and then is expecting you to answer that question. You may be able to do it depending on how good the original question was, but now your brain has kind of moved all over the place. LLMs are effectively kind of in the exact same way. So the best way to avoid this, one chat to one project. It's a good rule to keep in mind. Basically, the idea is that if I have a thread, I'm working on something, if I want to work on something new, start a new chat and work on that new thread. A couple other things, if the AI starts hallucinating or getting lazy, start a new chat as well. It's very likely that from just like a context window perspective, it probably just has too much built up in there, especially with some of the kind of the pro and thinking models since those thinking tokens get added. Best practice, try to keep individual chats to less than 50 messages. Once you get past that, you're really going to start kind of getting into you have a higher potential of getting into an area where like the context window is very bloated, which then is going to lead to more hallucinations as well. And one thing to kind of your point earlier, if you do have like a very long running chat and you're like, I'm not finished with this, but I want to continue this on, just ask the AI to summarize your conversation so far and then paste that in as your input for a new chat. So effectively is transferring that over. You get kind of the summary, and you can help kind of iterate with that. If the summary is not good or I need more information here, tell it that, let it iterate, kind of build a summary, but then you can use that as an input and kind of a starting for your next thread. Okay, so with that, now that we've got kind of current LLM state, we've got context window, kind of an understanding of kind of why LLMs work the way they are. Now we're going to jump into kind of some prompt. So when LLMs were first released with ChatGPT, when it first came out in November of 2022, prompt engineering was very important to get good results. The reason for this is because a lot of these models, the way they're trained, when they are just like trained right out of their initial training, they're not aligned with human. So there's this process called reinforcement learning with human feedback. All these models go through after, and basically what that is it's taking this thing that just predicts the next best word and making it where like that next best word aligns with human preferences. So you can imagine you could have like a parrot that just keeps talking and keeps giving you the best word, but it's not actually aligned with like helping you solve a problem or solve a challenge. So that's what that reinforcement learning with human feedback does. We've gotten a lot better at doing that. And so now kind of out of the box with that training, these models have gotten much better at when I give it a prompt, it's going to give me something back that seems pretty reasonable. And the way that generally this is done alongside of kind of post training is you also have system prompts. So system prompts are these kind of default instructions that ChatGPT, Gemini, and all these large language models have that you don't see, but are given at the beginning of every thread. So GPT 5.2, its system prompt is around 20,000 tokens, allegedly, around 30 single space pages. So it is giving a ton and a ton of context about how it wants to interact with, how it wants the OpenAI has given a lot of information about how it wants GPT 5.2 to interact with you. Things like writing style, the tone, being friendly, being truthful. It has access to a lot of these tools. We saw kind of the Maps tool and the search tool on the Gemini side. OpenAI has the ChatGPT has similar ones like that. Also kind of the persona, but just it's giving all of this information to kind of guide it into a place where it's going to generally behave very well and give you good information. However, with that, prompting is still very important for structuring your output and ensuring you're getting that appropriate. One thing, kind of a takeaway to remember from a prompt formula, there's 5 key components. So there's the persona, who is writing this or who is the audience for this, the context, why is, what does the large language model need to know to give me a good output out, the task, what am I actually asking it to do, any constraints that I have for what that looks like, and then the format that I care about, right? A bulleted list, 1 page, 2 page, 5 page. So with that, we're going to walk through a few examples. So we're going to start with a very generic prompt, write an email about the project delay. Right? That is the most generic thing It could be about any possible delay, any kind of project. And we're going to work through and kind of give a little bit more context as we go along. So then we're going to go to adding in the persona and the context, and then we're going to add in kind of all of the components. So you can see kind of the difference in the output that we get. So here, and sorry, I have been battling a cold. So hopefully my voice will stay good for the rest of the rest. Okay, so here we're going to jump over. Write an email about project delay. And what you'll see, kind of to the point earlier about how it's not going to be the exact same every time, you'll see that the outputs for these are going to be similar, but they won't be. See how different it is. But so what Gemini is going to do is it pretty quickly realizes that this is a very, very broad task. And so instead of giving me an email, it's going to give me 3 different templates. So option 1 is to a client or external stakeholder. Option 2 is to internal leadership or a manager. And then option 3 is to the project. So it's going to give me these general templates that I could go in and fill with information. And if one of these ended up matching exactly what I wanted, well, then I have a good answer. Take that. But what I can do is I can be even more precise and give more context so that I get a much better output. So we're going to do, we're going to use this prompt. So you're a senior project manager, write an email about the AlphaGo 2 launch being delayed by 2 weeks due to server issues. So AlphaGo, if you're not familiar, it's a Google DeepMind product. It was able to beat the world champion at Go as a full reinforcement learning tool. Very cool product. We're just using this as kind of a sample. So what you can see, actually, if we compare these two, so this is the one on the left again that was run previously, the one on the right was run. You can see that there are lots of similarities between those two, right? And that kind of gets back to when we were talking earlier, that kind of probability distribution. The models are going to generate slightly different things, but overall they're going to give you kind of generally the same output. Sorry, but here we can see on the right, team, I'm ready to share an important update regarding the upcoming launch of AlphaGo 2. After a thorough review, we have to delay by 2 weeks. Reason for delay during final load testing, yada yada, revised timeline, next steps, best regards. So, right, instead of this just generic email template that I can fill out, now it's pulling in more information. It's put in specific information about server issues that would happen. It's talking about AlphaGo 2 specifically, and it adds in that I'm a senior project manager at the bottom, also kind of writing in that style of like what a senior project manager would look like. Now, alongside that, what we can do, and let me come here, is let's say instead of being a senior project manager, let's say you're a frustrated network engineer. So now I'm giving a little bit more depth. And for those who are in IT, I'm sure you wanted to write the email that will come out quickly. So what you'll see is that it's now going to not just write as a network engineer, right? Instead of a senior project manager. It's going to be significantly more technical, but it's going to be, you can tell the tone is very upset. So for example, we'll go through and look. Yeah, I've been, for the last 38 hours running on stale coffee and adrenaline, right? And you can see we cannot hotfix this. We cannot agile our way around physics. I'm going home to sleep for 6 hours. Please do not page me unless the data center is actually on. So, right, all we did between those two prompts, just to kind of put this in perspective, we changed 3 words. Right? We just changed senior project manager to frustrated network engineer, and we got completely different. And that's really the power from like a prompting perspective, is that you're more specific about what you want, you're going to get better output as well. One of the big things that is kind of an unlearn that we have to do, the longest time with search engines, it was always just put keywords in, keep it very short, very, very concise, get as many hits as possible. But with a lot of these large language models, that's now flipped on its head. You want to be more verbose, you want to give more information so that you get better output coming out. Okay, and then let me jump to the final one. And this one will be end up being somewhat similar, but we'll show an example. So this is just giving a little bit more context on kind of the formatting I want, and so we can compare that to the original one with the senior program manager, where I did not give, the saying, do not apologize, focus on the solution, use a bulleted list for next steps. So what you'll see, obviously, large language models use bulleted lists a bit, but we'll see that it's now explicitly calling this out as next steps. Here's some things. It ends up being less apologetic, going through. It's much more direct. And again, that's just because I'm giving it more information here. This is an update. Don't apologize. Focus on that. You can give it more information, give it more context, and if you do that, the output you're going to get is going to be. Okay, so then outside of kind of that kind of 5-part um, the formula I was talking about earlier, 2 other kind of superpowers that I want to show that are really really helpful. Show, don't just tell. LMs are fantastic at following provided structure. So if you have a template or you have a writing style that you like using or that your team is using, give that as examples to the large language model before it starts. You can use that, usually provide that in kind of with your initial prompt. So here's examples of how my team writes. Here's the style that we have. If you do that, then the output that you're going to get is going to be more consistent. A very funny example I did of this, we have an internal community of interest at Davidson, and I did a similar talk to this, but trying to do the difference between human-generated text and AI-generated text. So I had 4 examples where there was one that was human-generated by me, one that was AI-generated. We went through and did that, and almost everyone got that it was the human-generated one when they voted on it correctly. But then on the very last one, what I did is I got Gemini to give me the normal output. I then said, here are my 4 examples of how I write this. Rewrite this in my style, and the people that were in the room were completely split on which one was AI. Right? So even though it was generated by AI, because I told it to use my style, and they had just seen 4 examples of what my style looked like, enough people were like, well, there was a little bit of maybe some AI clues, but it was enough like your style that I ended up voting. And so this is a really good example where you can kind of give those templates, give those examples, and the model will end up outputting kind of more of what you're. The other one is iteration. I've talked with a lot of people. There are quite a few people who, when they're working with ChatGPT, they'll just do one prompt per thread. Don't do that. Make it a conversation. Do that one chat to one project. Right? If you're working on a project, keep iterating with it until you kind of get a resolution to that. They're very flexible. If the output doesn't match what you want, ask it to make changes. Here are a few that I've used semi recently, just as kind of some examples of things that I pulled up. So to kind of highlight this, and we're going to work through these, kind of a show don't tell and then an iteration. So first we're just going to ask it to generically write a bio for Altman. Then I'm going to give it a specific format, and then I'm going to do an iteration. We'll show the money hungry pirate, but we can also do some other fun. Okay, so for this one, we'll write a general bio for Altman here. And what you're going to see, and I'll kind of just walk through this on the side because it's going to end up being very similar. It's going to give you a fairly good bio, right? We didn't give it much direction, so it's going to give you a little bit about him, some key roles. Looks like this one didn't touch on his early life and education. Again, that's kind of the nature of being non-deterministic. They're not always going to give you the exact thing, but in general, it's giving me kind of the same type. Here, it talks about the 2023 OpenAI leadership crisis, where he was removed for a weekend, and kind of his vision. So you have some kind of information there from that. So what I'm going to do now is write a bio for Altman. But now I'm giving it a very specific format. I want you to follow the format. Name is a title who loves hobby. He is currently focused on goal. So I've run this a few times, kind of prepping for this, and generally it is almost always exactly the same, or maybe a word or two different in what it will give out. So give it just a second. So yeah, this ends up being exactly the same, I believe. Yeah, so Sam Altman is the CEO of OpenAI. He loves racing cars. He's currently focused on developing artificial intelligence. Now, from kind of an iteration perspective, we could say, that's a little too boring. Change the tone to witty and write it like a money-hungry pirate. You don't have to follow the exact template, but keep it very brief. We'll see what comes out here, and then I'm going to do one other one after this as well. We're going to write as a Gen Z Alpha Internet connected, or as a Gen Alpha okay, so here it said, I, Captain Sam Altman, commander of the OpenAI galleon, I be sailing the high seas of Silicon Valley, hunting the legendary treasure of AGI, racing fast lane ships on the side. Hand over your compute and venture capital, you scallywags, the future ain't you. So obviously, right, this is a kind of a fun example, but the idea, right, is Right. And so now we've got Immaculate Racing Riz, Bros Speedrunning AGIFR, it's giving main character energy. Right. So so much fun. Uh, but you can imagine, right, going through and doing these like that. This is the kind of thing, right? If you're iterating with the models, you can continue you can continue, you know, forcing the output into what you want it to actually be instead of just, hey, give me what you give out as like the first output. Another one I wanted to quickly show, and we'll jump back to the, I'll go to launch delay up network. So let's say that you were the frustrated network engineer, but it's been 30 minutes, you didn't send this email and you've calmed down. You could ask it, remove the frustration from the uh, email and shorten it by 50. So a more professional version of instead of money hungry pirates and Gen Z. But I think you get the point, right? From an iteration perspective, if you're looking for trying to working with these tools, if you continue iterating with them over time, you will get better performance, you get better outputs that kind of better match. So when you look through and see, there's no more talk about 38 hours. There's no hate on agile. It's very focused, shorter. Sorry, and just a much better kind of much better email from a professional setting. Um, okay, with that, that's the last one on prompt engineering before we get into the AI tools. So I'll stop there for a second, see if anybody has any questions. Yeah. Um, yeah. Right. So the thing with large language models, so in general, to kind of answer your question, most of the like big models that come out, so like a ChatGPT 5.2 or a Gemini, they have a specific knowledge cutoff, and that's essentially when they were starting the training. They only had data up to that point. They then start training the model and they release. Generally, this is about 3 to 6 months. For ChatGPT, for Gemini, they both have tools where they can go do Google searches to get that more up to date information. But if it's something that they can't find online, that's something that you would have to provide in context for them to be. And that's where like some of the tools like Copilot that's getting integrated into kind of inboxes, email, that's where you're going to start seeing a lot more benefit from those kinds of tools over just your generic ChatGPT and Gemini because it has access to that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're still a work in progress. I haven't used Copilot a ton. I've heard mixed reviews about it. So I don't know for that one specifically, but there's not going to be a 100% guaranteed way without putting that into specifically yourself putting. Any other questions before we move on to the? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. I think if you're looking for kind of yeah, if you're looking for kind of like ideas on like how can I prompt better in the future, then that would be a good use case. And it would be able to kind of help give some ideas for that. Um, I have not done that myself, so I don't know how effective it would be, but I'd recommend trying it out and seeing if it can give you some more. Hey, I wish you would have given me more specific feedback here. One thing I would recommend if you are doing that is to add in the phrase like be honest and give critical feedback. Do that way. It's like it kind of gets out of its like, oh, the user is always right mode and it will give you that true feedback. The other thing you can do is that I commonly do with prompting is get it to ask you questions. So it's like, when I'm starting out something and I don't really know where I want to go with something, I can say, I have this general idea if I want to build this type of like application. Give me some questions so that you can help refine how I'm thinking about it so that I give you more clear context. And by answering those questions, that then gives kind of a little bit more. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah. No, I'm not super familiar. What do you mean by reverse? Okay, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Mhm. Yes. Yeah, so, I don't have that specifically here, but yeah, that would be another great use case from just like a prompting perspective, where and I do that pretty often. One thing you can do that I've seen quite a few people do is if you do have access to both like OpenAI and Gemini, essentially pit them against each other, use one to generate your deck in this case, and then give that to Gemini, be extremely critical of this, give me feedback and what are people going to This is a very good use case. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Alright. Alright, with that, we're gonna jump into kind of the AI tools, portion for this. So I have a lot of examples on the slide. This table will also be up at the very end of the presentation as well, but feel free to go ahead and now. But this is just kind of a broad scope of tools that are out there that you may or may tried to group them into kind of into categories. It's a bit hard just because there is a lot of overlap between some of them. But what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover the three in green today. So deep research, Notebook LM, chatting with documents, and then agentic coding. And when I say agentic coding here, this is essentially when Brian talked earlier today about Lovable, that idea of like prompting to app. That's what I'm talking about here. The more like technical, getting into generating the code or generating code, reviewing the code, kind of getting that deeper technical level. That's more on the code generation side. That'll be covered a good bit tomorrow with the two workshops. And then all of the ones in the creativity section, image generation, video generation, audio generation, speech, all of that will be covered in the Thursday workshop that David is running. So you'll have more opportunities kind of throughout the rest of the workshops to see some of these other tools. I wanted to focus on these three as these are the three in my mind. If you just use ChatGPT, these are the next like three that would be, I think, in my mind, the most helpful kind of from enhancing your product. Sorry. Okay. The first one we're going to talk about is deep research. This is a tool that is available on both OpenAI, so in ChatGPT, and in Gemini. Also, Perplexity has a version of this from a deep research perspective as well. I haven't really used Perplexity too much, so I can't comment on it too much. We'll see kind of for deep research, what you really want to think about for this tool is imagine you have a task that's going to require a bunch of Googling. You're going to have to go visit a bunch of different websites. You have to consolidate all of that information into a report, and then present that report to someone. You're essentially doing a bunch of research, lots of sources. That's really where deep research is going to shine. It's going to go a step beyond the thinking pro models by repeatedly searching the web for sources. And generally, these are going to generate 15, 20, even 30-page reports. Best use cases for these: competitive analysis, market research, and customer understanding. So one way that I use deep research personally, if we have a customer meeting with maybe a new PA or now PAE with a customer I'm not super familiar with, I'll go into deep research and say, hey, I'm about to meet with this person, this person, this person, this person from this organization. Tell me about their organization. Tell me about their goals. Tell me about them. And it'll give me a 15 to 20-page report on kind of, hey, here's competitive intel on what they care about, what they're looking for, what contract vehicles are available, so that I'm prepared kind of walking into that engagement. The other piece, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, you can also use deep research kind of in a similar way we were talking about earlier. You could use deep research, generate kind of that full report, and then use that as context for a follow-on chat. Then you could continue chatting with that. We'll also see how you can do that with Notebook LM as the next block. Okay, so with that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into my deep research chat, and we're going to do, and this is one that I just got Gemini to generate for me. It's kind of an example deep research. This is a competitive analysis one. I'm going to run it. The one on the left has already been run in fast mode. We'll run the one on the right in pro mode. Then we're going to run it in deep research. I've already got that pulled up on the. So we'll be able to see just kind of all three, just the comparison. Okay, so like we saw earlier with kind of the instant mode, so I'm on the left side of the screen now. The prompt was, I want to do a competitive analysis of Figure AI, the robotics company. Find me their full partnership list, BMW, OpenAI, etc. Find a timeline of their funding rounds and summarize the critical reception of their latest demo video from tech forums, specifically looking for skepticism about teleoperation versus autonomy. So it gives me good information because this happened long enough ago, and the fast model has that information built in. It gives me a full partnership list. It doesn't go into a ton of detail, but it gives me a decent bit of information. It gives me a timeline of their funding rounds. All of these, again, happened before the latest cutoff. So it has access to that. And then it's going to give me kind of the critical reception of the latest demo. So again, kind of some information that it has, but it's not going to be the most up-to-date. And here it actually is trying pulling something from January 2026. Pretty sure it's a hallucination, but I'm not 100% confident. I'm not followed. If I instead use the Pro model, it's going to go into more detail. It's going to give me a bit more on the strategic and technical partners, give me more from the investors, more on the funding timeline perspective. And then it's going to go into much more detail from kind of the critical reception. So here it will have been able to do Google search. I think for this one, it chose not to. So I could prompt it and say, make sure you use Google search next time, the speed and some summary and so. Now, this is fine, but it's not really a deep level of competitive analysis. So what I could do instead, I will paste in the same prompt, click on here on tools, and click on deep research. The version for ChatGPT is very similar. It's also in like the bar as well. You can deep research, and when I run this, what it's going to do is it's first going to generate a research plan that it's going to go and actually execute for me. So it's going to say, I know these are the 3 things that you want. Here are the various things that I want, or that I'm going to go and explore before generating the report. So it'll take it just a second with that, and then we'll let it kick off before jumping into the full piece. So here, it's got seven essentially goals that it wants to complete. It's going to search for their official website. It's going to research their financial history, find recent major video demonstrations, search forums, analyze the forum discussions, filter the analysis, and then synthesize that into a full report. So I'm going to click Start Research, just so you can see what it looks like. And then we'll jump over here to kind of a final version. What it's going to do is it's going to pull up this kind of this window here. And as it goes through, you'll start seeing some text pop up, those kind of thinking tokens. And then you'll actually see the websites that it's going and searching for to find that information. Hopefully, Gemini on the web is a little bit buggy showing this in time. So hopefully we will see this soon. We'll give it just a second. Go ahead and jump over to the final output here. So the final output here, and I'm just going to scroll through this quickly just so you can see the amount of information that it's going to generate. It is going to give you a ton of information on this competitive analysis. So go through, it's going to generate a lot of information for you, give you a much more in-depth kind of competitive analysis. It's going to tell you all the sources that it used in the report. There you go. Now that it's worked. And the other really nice thing is that as you go through and you'll see these little drop downs here, it'll actually show you where it's pulling that information from for that specific paragraph. So here, and you would have to kind of go through and see, but so a prevailing theory on Hacker News, both of these are Hacker News, figures using hybrid control architecture, and so it will give you kind of that information as well. Obviously, we don't have time to read through the entire thing, and a lot of times, quite frankly, deep research is a bit overkill for what you're looking for, but it then gives you all of the context that you need to then ask questions about it later on, to then kind of continue iterating with it there. And so on the right, you can see this is it, working in real time. So it did a few thinking steps, went and researched a variety of websites here. I was looking at YouTube videos because we were asking about the latest demo, looking at Hacker News, looking at the Figure website. It then does some more thinking. Then it's going to go and look at more websites. So that's kind of that agentic flow of we've given it this goal. You've got this research plan that you're trying to go finish, and it's going to continue iterating on that until it feels like it has sufficient information to give you that report back. Sorry. So here, right, deep research, very cool tool because it gives you kind of that ability. But now we're going to take it to the next level. So deep research is great, but Notebook LM is what I would strongly recommend if you are starting. If you find deep research very interesting, we're about to walk through all of these capabilities to show kind of how Notebook LM takes it to the next level. I do have this example here, so if you did want to follow along, I can send the slides out after. I'm happy to do that. But what I did for Notebook LM, so Notebook LM is a Google product, but you can use this without a Gemini subscription. If you do have a Pro or Gemini Pro subscription, you get a little bit more access to higher rate limits on things. But what I did here was I took NVIDIA's latest keynote, Computex 2025, which is just a YouTube video. That's an hour and 42 minutes. I don't have time to watch that, but I do want to know about NVIDIA. So I know how much I'm going to be making next month because all of our stocks are tied in NVIDIA. And I also pulled their 10Q, which has a lot of like financial information. So what I did, and unfortunately it doesn't save it here, but I just pasted in these sources and actually show you that really quick. If I just have this YouTube video here, add source, I can paste in this video, and it will. I already have it twice here, but it will add in another version of that. So it'll even pull in YouTube videos, it'll pull in websites, it'll pull in PDFs, whatever type of data that you'd like to put in. What I did is I took those initial two and I said, I'm trying to learn more about the financial state of NVIDIA. Here are two potential sources. Go find other sources that would be helpful for me understanding their financial state. It did deep research on that, and all of the sources that then added to my notebook. All the ones here, except for this YouTube video and the bottom, this one here, which is the 10Q that I showed earlier that I put in. All of the rest of these were found by deep research. These are all relevant to the question I'm asking, all loaded in here. And now what I can do is I can chat with these just like I would a ChatGPT or ChatGPT or Gemini. So I'll just click one of like the pre-built ones that it has in. One of the nice things that it has over a regular kind of Gemini chat or ChatGPT chat is it's going to, for almost every statement that it makes throughout, okay, here we go. It's going to give you a specific, okay, second, sorry. Okay. Once it finishes running, we should be good. Okay, it's just going to keep HTML. Okay, give it just 1 second until it finishes generating that, so I can show you without it bouncing back up to the top. Okay, now we're good. Okay, so what it will do, I just asked one of the default questions: how NVIDIA's Rubin platform changed the AI landscape? As I go through and see, you'll see that it has these various like numbers that pop up. If I click on one of these, and what you'll see is, so here we're talking about NVIDIA redefining the unit. And what these will be is, this is the information that it is pulling from my specific sources to make these statements here. So if I go here, let's see, we'll jump through a couple of these. Some of these you'll have a little bit less exact specifics. You see here. So here, for example, we're talking about the various components, and these are listed here on the side. So what I can do is I can take this source, and now I know that what Notebook LM is providing in the chat is cited from a source that I have. And if, for example, if it did hallucinate and it was showing me text here that was not matching there, I would then immediately know that it's hallucination. But the idea is now I can add in all of these sources, I can chat with them. One of the big benefits here is that instead of just using kind of the normal context window, this uses retrieval augmented generation, so it can search over all of these sources at the same time. Think of it as kind of, it's able to do a mini Google search on all of your sources. Instead of having it all in context at the same time, it's able to go through and actually pick out specific chunks that match to kind of what it is. But the really cool part from a Notebook LM perspective is these various studio tools on the side. So you can, and we'll listen to this in a second, you can generate a podcast out of all the sources. It'll generate around a 20-minute podcast. We do that. Generate a video, generally a 7-ish minute explainer video. You can generate flashcards. So I've already had these generated. So if, for example, let's say I'm studying for a college class instead of just work, maybe I could generate flashcards to then give me, hey, ask me questions about this and see if I actually know the material. You can go through all these completely, generated by Notebook LM. I did not go through any of these. And then The other piece, it will generate quizzes for you. So based on the sources that you have, we'll generate quiz questions. So a really good use case that a lot of people do if you're in a college class or in just a general class, dump in all of your study notes, dump in your study guides, dump in the textbook if you have that, and then ask it to generate quizzes about specific chapters, specific topics here. But the one that I wanted to show that I think is extremely cool, we're going to listen to the podcast that generated. We're going to do about a minute and a half.
January
But this is fully AI generated, all on the sources that I added.
Really look, it feels like the whole world is quiet.
It really does, and not in a metaphorical sense.
No, not at all. We are seeing this physical gut renovation of the global economy. We're talking about cables, power grids, new cooling systems, huge amounts of silicon.
It's a massive shift. People are saying we're in the middle of the largest infrastructure build out in human history.
You mean larger than the railway, bigger than the interstate highway system?
It's even bigger than the internet build out in the 90s.
Wow.
In terms of capital, the sheer amount of money being poured into concrete, copper, computing, and the speed of it all.
Yes.
And right at the center of this storm is NVIDIA.
Right. But we need to get something straight right away.
What's that?
We have to stop thinking because for most people, NVIDIA is still the folks who make graphics cards for my gaming PC.
Or maybe just that stock that went way up.
Yeah. But they're not that. They've become an infrastructure. They're basically the new electric grid.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that's what today is about. Not their stock price, but how they are literally architecting the physical world to run AI. Because if you control the architecture, you control the economy.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into NVIDIA's absolute dominance. We're going to unpack their, frankly, mind-bending financials, this whole concept of AI factories, and why you might have a supercomputer on your desk sooner than you think.
So that's just to kind of give you an example. But imagine, right, that you're trying to learn some new topic and you find a bunch of sources online. You could then dump these into Notebook LM, ask it to generate a podcast for you, and then you listen to that on your way to work. Instead of you having to go through, find all these sources, spend hours reading through them, figuring out what is good, what is bad, you can generate a podcast, listen to that, and then you'll probably have 80 to 90%. There's going to be some stuff that you'll have questions about, but you can come back to the Notebook LM chat, ask it questions, and then it will either be able to give you sources of where, hey, what is the information or what are the answers? Then you can use that as a launching off point just from like a learning perspective. So it's a really cool tool. Definitely recommend playing around with it. There's a lot of like kind of capacity. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure if there is a length limit on your sources, but there is a limit on the number of sources that you can add. So if you do not have a Gemini like Pro account, I believe it's 100 sources. If you have a Gemini Pro account, you can do up to 300 sources. Any other questions on that? Okay, cool. So then the last tool that we're going to talk about is a agentic coding tool. Specifically, we're going to use Replit today, but it's very similar to Lovable, which got mentioned earlier today. There are a lot of other tools out there like this, Bolt, Work, B0, there are a ton. But basically, the idea is that, as Brian talked about earlier today, is the like ability to develop and deploy software has gone basically to zero. We now have a lot of these tools where you are just prompting it and able to generate software. So you're able to develop full running apps from that. So a few use cases for kind of these kind of applications. One is small applications that only you would use. For those of us who are tinkers who are use software a lot, there are lots of like small things that are like, it would be really cool to build that, but it's way too much time to actually build it, right? Well, with these tools, and you'll see in just a second, we'll build one in about 5 minutes. You can now do that really quickly with rapidly prototyping features. So this kind of goes into the bullet below. I have a good friend who is actually he works at a radiology company. He's their chief innovation officer. But they also have a software team as part of that, helping to develop out kind of the platform. One of the ways that they use Replit is they've actually used that to accelerate their software development lifecycle. And the way that is that in the past, from kind of an agile perspective, you have a product owner who's like, we want to do this feature for our application. Maybe they want to have a drop down on. Well, a drop down on a dashboard can mean 100 different, well, there's a vision of what that is, but it can be implemented 100 different ways. It can be on the right side, it can be on the left side, it can be a really long bar, it could be different colors and so forth. But what they're doing is now is they're forcing their product owners to build the feature in Replit. They're going to actually go out and build, hey, here's the drop down I want to see. And then they give that version to the engineering team. Now the engineering team is going to take it, they have a visual of here's exactly what I need to build. And then they're going to go do the security, make sure that it's robust, kind of avoid the technical debt that comes with some of the tools. But the way that you can now do that, like this is significantly changing from even just like a product owner role perspective. You're able to interact and interface with these tools. You're able to improve communication and really reduce that development. So with that, we're going to jump into a couple tools. And the first I'm actually going to show you the end product of a demo that I made. Well, there we go. So I made this quite frankly, and you'll see. I'll kind of walk through the steps, and we're gonna build one together here with the time we have left. But this is one I built yesterday, just as kind of a prep. In total, it took 5 minutes. You'll see that I can show you that it took 5 minutes. It took a little under $5. This is deployed on the internet. Anyone can hit that website, corporatetranslator.demo.replit.app. You can go on. You could use this. This is a very simple tool, but you can go extremely, extremely far with it. So for here, all this is doing is it's letting me translate raw, unfiltered thoughts into something that is more professional. So if I say I hate this meeting, it is a waste of time, which we've all thought. If I just leave on kind of the default settings, the target generation is millennial. This is going to be an email. We'll have medium professional, medium brevity. All right, team, I wanted to flag that the recurring meeting feels unproductive. It's pretty long, but it gives me kind of the output. If instead, let's say I want to target a Gen Alpha, I don't want this to be professional. I want this to be pretty short. We'll say it's a Slack message, and we're going to maximize the strength just so we see like difference here. I can do that. And now it's going to generate a Slack message that someone from a Gen Alpha would expect. Right? So like, but this was all like, all of the, I mean, to kind of put in perspective, right? This was a series of 5 prompts that I'll show you in just a second. This is deployed on the internet. Anyone can touch this. Anyone can hit this. And it was done in 5 minutes, right? This is not a super impressive website. I'm not trying to say that it is, but I was able to generate this super, super fast. If you have an idea and you want to generate something, you can do it with these tools very, very fast. Let me show you what it actually looked like under the hood to go through and do this. And I will kind of show you kind of the process that I went through for this. And then we'll build one our own. So be thinking of an idea of an app you'd want to build. So we'll need a suggestion from someone. So where I started, I actually started in Gemini. Was asking Gemini for some potential ideas from like a demo perspective on kind of what would be useful. And I asked it to generate an initial prompt for me. So it gave me this prompt here. That's just this initial version of my application. So it went through and it did that. It worked for 1 minute. It failed to run. I had to debug it. It ran for another minute, and then it was successful. So it had like an initial preview version ready to go, not this full version. But now that I had that version done, I was like, all right, I want to add some features to this. So I'm going to add a professionalism and a brevity slider and a drop down for different types of platforms. I also told it, hey, the first one I was like, don't worry about actually connecting to OpenAI. Just leave it as like it'll just copy over. For this one, actually connect to OpenAI, so you're using a large language model behind the scenes to actually generate the output. So I did that. It worked for 2 minutes, 3 minutes total. Another 30 seconds here. Had a couple errors, but I just asked it to fix the error. It was successful in that. And then I said add another configuration slider, just like the audience generation, and that's what we just demoed and saw. And then I've published it, and the publishing takes about a minute. But you can see it was essentially 5 prompts to generate all of this. Published out on the internet. Anyone can go and access it. Anyone can use it from that. So what we're going to do, we're going to build another app just so you can see kind of the full process here. Want someone to give me an idea for a relatively-ish small app that they would like to build. Throw out your ideas and I'll pick one. I just don't want to blow through all of my credit on Replit, so yeah. Yeah. What's an idea that Okay. How about recommend? Okay, let's do this. Let's say, given a LinkedIn profile, try to find other um, professionals on LinkedIn that they should be connected, but currently. Um, we'll see how this goes. I'm not sure how much of this is going to be like hidden behind um, LinkedIn APIs and so forth, but we'll see kind of how far it goes. So the way that I would start with this, Replit does have a plan mode that you can use. So you could do that in Replit. You would end up paying a bit for that. So I end up just putting this into Gemini. Um, and so, okay, okay, this, all right, let me start. I need you. Okay. that um, but again, this is kind of the same thing talking about earlier, right? Continue iterating with it to get. So we will get this, and then we'll dump this into Reddit. All right, sorry, Reddit, into Replit. Okay, here is our initial prompt. I'm just going to copy and paste this entire thing. Loads, and then we will just drop this here. Gemini doesn't like copying directly out. Okay. Okay. So we're going to give it kind of this general outline, and I could have gone through and made more modifications that I want it to be to look in this specific way, or I want to do. But I'm just dumping it in directly, just so you can see kind of a true workflow, what that looks like. We'll see how effective it is. This will take probably about a minute. So if anybody does have any questions on Replit, yeah, I am right for this one. Yeah. Well, it will be turned off pretty soon after this workshop. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yes, definitely. Yes, you definitely can. So what is nice is that for quite a few of them now, they do have like hard caps on spend that you can set. You can also set obviously budget alerts and stuff like that. But that's also a kind of a good point. And when it comes here for Replit, like it's going to default to using Claude Opus 4.5, which is the best model from a coding perspective. For a lot of actual applications that you use, you sometimes don't need like the best of the best model, and you can get away with using a lower tier model. So for example, in the corporate translator one that I was using, that's using GPT-5 Mini, which is a very small model, but it is still good enough for doing that task. So that's one thing. As you do start building out and kind of connecting them, test out different models. You don't always necessarily need the most powerful model, but if you're using something that's like a credits-based approach where you get like number of requests or something, then generally you want to lean towards using the more powerful model. Yeah. So the way that it works, so you monthly get, so their monthly tier is $25 a month. So actively there is a code, try 2601, which will turn it down to $5 just for this month. I think it expires at the end of this month. If you're wanting to try it out, I'll mention that at the end as well. But you have $25 in credit for like the Replit agent, and then you can top that off after that. So you pay for the agent on the side here. So that's actually calling out to the LLM. And then once you publish it and kind of make it production, you're paying a very discounted rate from like the Google Cloud Platform servers. So you end up, yeah. So Grok would be another model similar to similar to ChatGPT, similar to 5.2, similar to Gemini, and similar to Anthropic. So it is XAI's version of kind of the best one. Grok, in my opinion, I have found Grok to not be as good as the other three. Where Grok is very useful though is if you are on X or Twitter very often, you can just at Grok to answer questions, and it does have access to live Twitter data, which can be helpful for certain things. But in general, I personally have just not found Grok as good as. But your mileage may vary when it comes to that. So recommend trying out all of them. Okay, so it is still working. So it's taking a little bit longer. Any other questions? All right. Well, we will give this a second. Finish running. What I'm going to do, for sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and jump to kind of the last few slides that I have, and then we'll jump back to see how far it got from a rep perspective. Wanted to be honest, right? It does take some time, and if you ask for bigger things, it's going to take a long. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So when I say GCP, I just mean Google Cloud Platform. So think of it as like deploying to AWS or deploying to Azure. It's not deploying to your specific project. They're just using servers in Google. um, yeah. Okay. So then the final piece I wanted to touch on today is really just the future is here from an agentic AI perspective. So chatbots have been around now for a little over 3 years. Really, ChatGPT was the first iteration of this, really kind of broke on the scenes. We then had GPT-4 a few months later, and really even as far back as like when GPT-4 was announced, there were lots of people trying to do this kind of agentic thing. There was Auto Engineer, there's GPT Engineer. There are a few other ones that were kind of trying to do this kind of iteration, agentic perspective that we talked about, where you have a goal that you're trying to solve rather than just doing kind of a back and forth prompt. Over the past really 3 to 6 months, these tools have gotten significantly better. So Claude Code has been huge. A lot of developers have been using that. You heard kind of Brian talk about that a little bit this morning. Claude Cowork as well. So this is just Claude Code, but a desktop version of this. One thing that's interesting, Claude Cowork, 98% of the code for Claude Cowork was written by Claude Code. So for this tool, right, 2% was like human written. Now, obviously, there's lots of prompting. There's lots of stuff that goes into it. Like you're not taking the human part out of it, but almost all of it was written by Claude. And then over this past weekend, this tool ClaudeBot has exploded. And basically, what it is it is an open source version of Claude Code that you can sit on your machine. It would have access to all of your files, all of your basically any action on your computer, which is pretty scary from a security perspective. But it's able to do tons and tons of things. And really, it's more of at this point, ClaudeBot, there are some cool use cases for it. But with some of these tools right now, they are very good, but they are also overhyped. So Claude Cowork, there's lots of buggies. Claude Cowork, if you start looking through Twitter to see how people are using it, there are some very cool use cases of how people are using it. But at the same time, there are also people being like, this is buggy, this is not super great. And really, that's kind of being on the bleeding edge of tech. Like it's not going to always be perfect, but it's getting much better. And so even though these tools are not perfect today, we are definitely very close to a future where like we have these much more deeply integrated. Copilot is a really good example. When Copilot first, they have like 17 different things called Copilot. I hope you know what I mean. But like when the Copilot, the like AI version first came out, it was absolute garbage. Connected into Bing, and it was hallucinating all the time. And now like the Microsoft Copilot, there are still issues as you talked about earlier, but it's gotten significantly better over time. It's not integrating with all of my files, all of my stuff, it's giving more context. And one thing I want to show, it's kind of a benchmark to show kind of how these tools are getting better. There's this group called the Model Evaluation and Threat Research, or METER. And one thing that they do, they have looked at measuring AI ability to complete long tasks. Basically, the idea here is that they have a lot of various software engineering tasks that they've gotten humans to go out and solve. They'll measure the average time it takes a human to solve those tasks, and then they'll try giving those tasks to large language models and to kind of the agent harnesses, and seeing how long of a task they're able to solve. So you can see on the graph here, on the left side, this is the task duration for humans. So something like counting words in a passage may take 45 seconds to a minute. Imagine it's like a page long. Finding a fact on the web, maybe around 10 minutes. Implementing a dictionary attack, implementing a simple web server. All of these are under 30 minutes from kind of grading perspective. You can see the progress over time. So with GPT 3.5, which is really ChatGPT, it was basically, I think the actual number is around 9 seconds was kind of the average length of task to do. GPT-4 increased that to a little under a minute. You can see we've had a sharp increase over the past essentially year, and these tools are getting significantly better. Now, the way to read this chart is you can see at the top it's 80% success. What they're looking at for tasks that are around that are essentially it gives it all of these tasks. It's looking at, okay, for what how long of a task can we give it where we expect it to complete it with an 80% success rate. It has this large benchmark of tasks that it will go and do. Some are extremely long, some are pretty short, and it'll pass all of those to these various models. And then using that, you can predict what would be an 80% success rate. So, for example, GPT 5.1 Codex Max, current kind of one of the current best models, it on on a general task of around 30 minutes from a software engineering perspective, you would be able to expect that to be able to complete it in about 80%. So think about like a task that like a general software engineer would do. It would take them 30-ish minutes. Today, GPT 5.1 Codex Max would likely be able to finish that in about 80%. Now, I want to kind of caveat this graph with these are kind of perfect settings from a software engineering task that don't have like a lot of the messiness of the real world. And this is still like a predicted thing. There's very large confidence intervals on this. The point I'm not trying to say is that these are all going to take over our jobs. What I'm saying is that they are accelerating quickly. Right? With the agent harnesses that we've developed over the past year, they've gotten much, much better very quickly. So this is the 80% success rate. If we drop it down to the 50% success rate, you can see that their estimate is that Claude Opus 4.5 would be able to complete tasks that are over 4 hours long. Which think about, I mean, right, that's a half a day of work. Right? And that's what you would be able to give to Claude Opus 4.5, and it'll be able to complete it about half. Again, there are very, very large confidence intervals on this, so I'm not saying it will always do 4.5, but the trend you can see kind of the dotted line is growing significantly, and it's actually an exponential trend is what they have measured, and so it's actually doubling in the length of time you're able to complete a task every 7 months. So right now, if even we use the 80% version, if GPT 5.1 Codex Max is 30 minutes, based on the trends that we're seeing, we should expect to see by August that the best model would be able to complete tasks that are roughly 1 hour long with 80%. Again, you know, there's a lot of questions there about where does this go, and so forth. But that is kind of the big thing. So the future is here. If you're interested in learning more on the agentic AI perspective, mentioned there are a few workshops here. These are all very heavily focused on AI agents. Building your first agent, prompts and processes is a more technical deep dive on how you do that with a tool like Cursor or Klein. And then we have one on AI and cyber automated exploitation. So with that, I'll leave this up as kind of some key takeaways. I've got my contact LinkedIn in the bottom right if you have any questions. And we'll jump back to Replit real quick. So it does look like it was able to do that. Let me pull in my LinkedIn really quick, and let me see if it works. And it immediately hit. So I would have to go through and debug this. That's live demos for you. But the idea right now, I can go through and say, hey, I have an issue with this. Go find this. Kind of. But I'll leave that up and then see if there are any other questions or thoughts. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it will do that. It's actually very good at that. Is what ends up, at least in my mind, kind of what ends up happening is that once I tell it, hey, there is an error, it's now going to go through. It's going to search through the logs, figure out like what's going on, and then it now has. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can. What you'll end up though with is kind of the context clutter that I talked about a little bit earlier, where like if I have all of these different chats that were on different topics and I summarize all of them and put them into the same chat, now every time I make a new message, it's reading all of those ahead of time. And so I wouldn't really recommend doing that. But if you have things that are like you have two chats that are like very similar and you want to then kind of cross over, then maybe summarize both and put those together. But I probably wouldn't do that for more than. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everybody.